The Michigan Man Podcast, episode 232. DJ Durkin is headed to Michigan, joining ex-boss Jim Harbaugh. And Michigan comes up with a big road win at Penn State. That and more on this week's show. Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast, brought to you in partnership with SB Nation's Maize N Brew, your best source for quality Michigan Wolverines news, analysis, stats, and scores from the fan perspective, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and Happy New Year. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. This isn't just our first show of the new year, it's also the beginning of a new partnership with SB Nation's Maize N Brew. I know many of you are familiar with the fine writers here on the site, and I'm proud to say we are now a part of the team. Beginning this week, the show will now be the featured podcast on Maize N Brew. So from now on, you can visit www.maizenbrew.com and get the latest football, basketball, hockey, and recruiting news, and then check out the Michigan Man Podcast. I'm looking forward to beginning this new partnership and would like to say Go Blue to my new listeners, while extending an invitation to all of my regular listeners to stop by the site as often as you can and check out the great coverage provided on everything Maize N Blue. So let's get it started today with Wolverine News and Notes. Various sources reported Tuesday night that Florida defensive coordinator DJ Durkin will be joining the new staff in the same capacity. He will be joined by new offensive coordinator Tim Drevno, who's coming from USC, and receivers coach John Morton from the 49ers. Keep in mind, nothing is official yet. All new hires must be cleared by human resources before an official announcement can be made. It was reported over the weekend that Kentucky tight end coach and recruiting dynamo Vince Marrow and Stanford strength and conditioning coach Shannon Turley were both joining the staff. But on Sunday evening, both let it be known they were staying put at their respective schools. There are also reports that Greg Madison will remain with the staff in some capacity. No word on whether running backs coach Fred Jackson will return. But on Tuesday, Buffalo Bill running back coach and former Michigan All-American Tyrone Wheatley was in town for an interview. So it appears Jackson's time at Michigan could be coming to an end. On today's show, we were hoping to have Wolverine editor John Borton on with us to get his thoughts on all of this football news, but our phone lines went down earlier today, and we just couldn't get John on in time to meet the publishing deadline. We'll try and get him back in the next few weeks, and we all know that there certainly will be plenty of football to talk about all winter as Coach Harbaugh continues to put his program and his staff together. While football is dominating the news, the Big Ten basketball season is entering its second week. It's a big week for Coach John Beilein's young team. Saturday's performance on the road against Purdue featured another offensive meltdown, but Tuesday night in another road contest, Michigan came up big with a 73-64 win against Penn State. For the first time in a while, the Big Three led the way. Karis LeVert knocked down 18, Zach Irvin 17, and Derek Walton Jr. added 12. Michigan returns home on Saturday to take on Minnesota at Chrysler Center. Entering Saturday's game, the Wolverines are 2-1 in the Big Ten and 9-6 overall. On today's Michigan Game Day segment, my guest is Michigan beat writer Brendan Quinn from MLive. That's next here on the Michigan Man Podcast in partnership with SB Nation's Maize N Brew. Joining us on our Michigan Game Day segment this week is Michigan basketball beat writer Brendan Quinn from MLive. Happy New Year, Brendan.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me, man.
Well, as at this point, we've got two big games this week, Brendan, and as we tape, you are en route to Penn State. So this is more of an overview of where we are as a team right now. Michigan comes into this week's action 8-6 overall. They're 1-1 in the Big Ten. A very disappointing road loss to Purdue on Saturday. In your Monday MLive column, Brendan, you said this team has to toughen up before it's too late. Is that more mentally or physically in your mind?
Well, I mean, it's hard, but you can make an argument for both, really. You haven't really seen, on the mental side, you haven't seen guys, step up and make plays like you've seen in the past, and probably a lot of Michigan fans have grown accustomed to. In terms of guys, making plays in the clutch, it just hasn't happened. Getting defensive stops when you need it. These guys are capable of doing that stuff. Everyone has seen it in the past, so it's in there somewhere. It just hasn't happened yet. And, physically, as undersized as they are down low, you just can't get out-rebounded by 22 in a league game like that happened at Purdue, and just completely dominated in the second half. It just can't happen. And whether that's your guards getting more involved or whether it's the guys that are already down there just playing stronger, something has to happen because it's not going to get any easier. When you look at the way that the schedule kind of plays out, this early portion of the league slate was supposed to kind of maybe give them some breathing room to grow up a little bit, and then it gets tough. So if they're still struggling at this point and losing some of these games, like a game at Purdue that might have been marked up as a win in a lot of people's eyes, they were an amazing performance from Aubrey Dawkins away from losing to Illinois at home. It's hard to say, kind of gauge where this team can go from here.
Well, lack of leadership, Brendan, on this team clearly is an issue right now, probably for a lot of reasons. They're such a young team, but you would hope Karis LeVert, Derek Walton Jr., those two guys would assume that role eventually, sooner than later, we would hope.
Yeah, you'd think so, and I think both of them are certainly capable of doing it. The problem is, right now, I think Derek Walton's confidence is clearly questionable because of whether it's the toe injury, whether it's just his lack of production that is now kind of weighing on him mentally. That could be it. But I voted Derek on my preseason first team All Big Ten list, ahead of Karis LeVert. I thought Walton had all the makings to be perhaps the best point guard in the Big Ten. So I obviously think very highly of him and his game, but it just hasn't translated at all recently. And if that's, I have to have a question. I have the question, and it's been asked, and it hasn't really been answered. But whether at this point they'd be better off just sitting him for a little bit to rest up that toe. I was actually talking to a doctor last night who said you can rest a guy with a turf toe or a sprained toe injury and see improvement, from week to week. Other guys, it might just linger, so you don't know what you're going to get if you sit a player. But at this point, the way Walton's playing, it's really hard to think that it might be a continued course that they're going right now is the best route. With Karis, it's hard to say. Sometimes it seems like he's trying to do too much, and then you ask yourself, is he the only option at times, and he's forced to do so many things by himself? That's a lot to ask for a guy, and it's a lot to ask for a guy who really only emerged last year as a player at the caliber that he is. So where he goes from here is anyone's guess.
Now, one of the things I wonder with leadership, Brendan, Derek Walton Jr. is a point guard. So, in high school, he was a leader. He seems to have the personality to be a leader. Karis LeVert, coming off the last 2 years, he didn't have to be that leader. You know how some kids just don't have the personality to be that kind of a guy? Do you think maybe that's the case with Karis? I
don't know. That's hard to say if you're not, we don't get open practices, so you don't really see much behind closed doors. If you remember earlier this year, I want to say it was the Oregon game or the Villanova game, Karis made a couple big plays, and he was fired up, and he was yelling at guys on the court, and it looked like a different guy that you saw from last year. And you haven't seen too much of that of late, and that's kind of a mystery as to why. It seemed like he was trending in that direction, and it kind of just ceased to occur. So that could be a byproduct of his own struggles shooting the ball at times. After putting up 32 points against NJIT, he just couldn't find his shot, and was shooting something like 25 or 28% from the field over the next 3 or 4 games, 3 of those being losses. So I don't know. It's hard to gauge a guy's personality and say whether he is or is not a leader. That's kind of a thing that is in the eyes of the beholder. There's plenty of quiet leaders out there who do it by example and things like that. Walton is obviously the easy answer there because he's a point guard, because he's a coach's son. He seems to have he's a little bit more outgoing nature, things like that. But you get to see it on the court. I mean, I can't list off many examples of very clearly saying, that's when Walton kind of took hold of the team and really did it. I haven't seen too much of that. It all seems to be possible, but it's just not there yet.
Well, Zach Irvin is one of the other guys that just we can't seem to, find or get into his groove on a consistent basis, Brendan. Why do you think he's struggled with being so up and down so far this year?
Well, it's hard to diagnose a shooter. When shots aren't falling, that's kind of a thing. You say, well, that he's capable of being a 40 to 45% three-point shooter. But when the shots aren't falling, you kind of scratch your head. The biggest problem, I think, with Zach right now is that you're not getting enough out of him in other areas. Rebounding the ball, playing defense, getting 50-50 balls. You've seen him of late be a little bit more willing to go to the basket. You saw it in the Purdue game, and he just couldn't convert layups. Pretty inexplicable stuff. And at one point in the second half, I believe after Zach missed his third layup of the game, John Beilein pulled him aside before going into a huddle at a timeout, and he spent a good 45 seconds talking to him. And you don't really see that from Michigan too often. Typically the coaches just go off by themselves for about a minute or so and then join the huddle and regroup from there. I think even Beilein himself is a bit at a loss right now as to what to do with Zach. And he still played 37 minutes against Purdue, but he's just kind of a guy out there sometimes. And it seems like when the shots aren't falling, he becomes a little bit more prone to just basically running three-point line to three-point line and kind of getting lost in the middle of the game.
Clearly, the triumvirate that we thought would lead this team in many ways, your Zach Irvin, Karis LeVert, Derek Walton Jr. struggling. So the team's looking for some kind of a spark. In that opener against Illinois, freshman Aubrey Dawkins provided that. Do you think we're going to see, especially with Zach Irvin struggling, see more of Aubrey Dawkins moving forward?
I do. I think you get a decent amount out of Aubrey in terms of rebounding. He brings a lot of energy on the floor. Obviously, the shooting against Illinois was fantastic. How consistent he can do that, I don't know if he's a guy that you still want going out there and shooting 7 threes a game. But he does bring some good energy, and he brings a change of pace. And maybe it's good to maybe light a little fire under some guys that he would then be getting minutes over. Perhaps that could have that residual effect. And there's a couple guys like that. You saw it from Spike Albrecht against Purdue, making threes, making things happen, bringing that energy out there. You've seen it plenty of times from Ricky Doyle. Mark Donnell has shown flashes. So there are guys, and I wrote last week that, if you just look at the numbers, if this team doesn't have one of its, quote unquote role players step up and have a 10 to 15 point game pretty much every time, any of them out of that lot of guys, they don't win. They haven't won this year when it's only been the big three taking the primary amount of shots and scoring, the bulk of the team's points. So, yeah, I think you're right there that they're going to need whoever it is on a game-to-game basis. And it's fine if it's a mix of guys. One day it's Spike, one day it's Doyle, one day so on and so forth. If that doesn't happen, the team becomes way too over-reliant on the big three, and that hasn't translated to wins.
Well, Coach Beilein likes to call those other guys contributing both on the court and coming off the bench outliers. Of course, that all depends on your big three having consistent play. But other than Spike coming off the bench to provide that, do you see anyone on the horizon that can maybe be one of those outliers that Coach Beeline talks about?
Yeah, I think Ricky Doyle certainly falls in that category. He can score at the rim. He has really good hands. He's done a lot of really nice things. He's one of the few guys who can contribute in the offensive rebounding category and get some second chance opportunities. So with not only the way that he plays and that kind of all out, he's got a little bit of McGarry in his action out there. Yeah, I would certainly circle Ricky Doyle in that category.
Well, on the glass has been a big problem area. It was just an incredibly poor rebounding performance on Saturday against Purdue. When we talk about getting tough in the paint is certainly one area where you don't have to dominate on the boards, but man, the play has just got to be better there. We've been seeing Denal, Doyle, and Bielfeldt. Is it just, with these guys more a lack of experience, or what do you think the problem is on the boards there?
Well, I mean, when you're only playing one big at a time, and none of them would be categorized as dominant rebounders or anything like that, I don't think it's that unexpected that this team is being out rebounded and maybe struggling a little bit on the glass. The problem is you just can't get dominated. It's one thing to get out rebounded by 3 or 4. If you remember the Villanova game when they played a much bigger, stronger, better team, they held their own on the glass. They were I think Villanova won the rebounding battle 35-31, and that was fine. That's not going to be a huge detriment that will cost you games. What can't happen is what you saw on Saturday at Purdue, where you just simply can't even compete on the glass on both ends of the floor. And especially, it doesn't help when as a team you're shooting 30% from the field. You're just going to get the other team is just going to be able to dictate everything that happens.
Well, with us on our Michigan Game Day segment this week, as we get ramped up for a big week in Michigan basketball, is Michigan beat writer Brendan Quinn from MLive. Brendan, something I found interesting coming out of this weekend's game, the Saturday's game in particular against Purdue, was that some of the Purdue players were saying Michigan was doing a lot of trash talking on Saturday, as if that's not part of the game.
Right.
This team doesn't look like a trash-talking team. Do you find it to be such?
No. I mean, we were all in the post-game press conference, myself and the other beat writers who were on hand for the game, kind of looked at each other a little bit puzzled. You just can't. It doesn't really fit the script when it comes to this team. But what I think it more so was the two teams. One of the way that Mackey Arena is designed, both teams exit through the same tunnel off the court, whereas at Chrysler, they exit on opposite sides, and a lot of other arenas are designed that way to avoid situations like this. And I just think Michigan, they made that great push at the end of the half with Spike hitting 3 straight threes, and I think they were just whooping it up a little bit, and just natural stuff. Purdue kind of just used that as something to fire themselves up. And talking with one of the Purdue beat writers out there, they said the same exact thing. Following their come from behind win over Minnesota last week, that's the team where the Gophers were talking some trash on the way out. So that's kind of a throwaway aspect of that game. Yeah, but I mean, more so to your point, I don't get the sense that this is a trash talking team whatsoever. And at times you'd say maybe it'd be better off if they would be. If they had a little attitude, they had a little anger to them. They brought some of that. John Beeline, comically so, loves to use the word swagger. You don't see much of that, other than, maybe when Zach hits a 3, you get a little attitude out of him, but when you're going 2 for 12, that doesn't really translate overall.
Well, the final question for you today, Brendan, it's a big week, as we know. Even though there are 16 games left in the conference slate, it would be very tough to recover if this team gets off to a 1-3 start in the Big Ten, especially with a team that's just seems to be psychologically fragile at this point. Yeah. I mean, that is for you don't like to talking about must-wins and things like that when it's still early January, just because historically speaking, there's been plenty of teams who go and win 9 of their last 10 or 6 of their last 7 and notch some really good wins and get some momentum. And while the NCAA tournament committee says that doesn't weigh, everyone finds it hard to believe, but. You're right. Because of the damage that they did to themselves in non-conference play, basically coming out without any really, really quality wins. Those wins over Oregon and Syracuse are decent enough on paper,
but I don't really see. Syracuse might end up finishing 9th or 10th in the ACC this year. That team just isn't your typical Syracuse team. Oregon is so, and we'll see how they do in the Pac-12. But otherwise, to not get any of those marquee wins, to lose to SMU at home, to have those two major losses to NJIT and EMU, there's not a lot there to work with in terms of a tournament resume. So, yes, if they go and lose at Penn State and really fall into a hole and are still get to play some of the better teams in the conference, now you start talking, the three-letter tournament that no one wants to bring up.
There's 16 games left, and we've seen Coach Beilein. If we know one thing about the way he coaches, his teams get better. And when you've got this many young guys on the team, it's way too early to throw in the towel.
Yeah. I think that's probably for your Michigan fans out there. That's probably the one thing that you can hang your hat on right now and not completely pack it in on your hopes for this year. Is that Beilein does have a track record for turning teams around. At the same time, there is still plenty of talent here. I mean, no one's going to sit here and say that Karis LeVert and Zach Irvin and Derek Walton Jr. and some of these other guys are any different than they were at the beginning of the year when hopes were as high as they were, and they were ranked, and rightfully so. There is something in there, and it's just a matter of, if a flip switches and suddenly they all start hitting threes, they look like a completely different team. There were times this year when all those guys were making threes that everyone's looking at each other saying, they still got this thing rolling. They're going to go right back to the tournament, make some more noise, and all's right in the Michigan basketball world. But the last month has taken its toll. I think the biggest question now is not only how they bounce back on the floor, but if they're mentally weak, or if they can kind of find confidence in the tank and turn this thing around.
Well, our guest here with us on Michigan Game Day this week has been Michigan basketball beat writer Brendan Quinn from MLive. And as we've been mentioning throughout the course of this interview, it's a long season, and that means we will get you back soon, Brendan. So take care, and we look forward to the next time.
Happy to do it, Mike. Happy New Year to you.
Thanks again to Michigan beat writer Brendan Quinn from MLive for being our guest today on our Michigan Game Day segment. Coming up next, we wrap it up for another week here on the Michigan Man Podcast in partnership with SB Nation's Maize N Brew. On Wolverine Quick Hits today, the University of Michigan women's basketball team led by as many as 20 points, and when the lead was cut to 7 late in the second half, they made big shots in the final minutes for a 74-65 win over number 24 Michigan State on Sunday afternoon in front of 4,520 fans at Chrysler Center. The Maize N Blue had 4 players score in double figures, led by freshman Caitlin Flaherty's 21 points. The Point Pleasant, New Jersey native was 5 of 9 from three-point range and a perfect 4 of 4 from the free throw line. Sophomore Sierra Thompson made 3 triples, part of her 17 points for the day. Senior Saisha Gori had 14 points and 9 boards to go along with 3 steals, and classmate Shannon Smith had 11 points and dished out a game-high 7 assists. Senior Nicole Elmblad recorded 7 rebounds and 5 steals as Michigan forced 24 turnovers on the day and recorded 15 team steals. The Wolverines will be on the road Wednesday evening in Piscataway to take on Rutgers. Michigan is 10-4 overall, 2-1 in Big Ten play. Hockey will be back in action this week as they entertain Minnesota at Yost Ice Arena. The Wolverines are 10-7 overall, 6-3 in Big Ten play. Both Michigan baseball and softball are busy with indoor workouts these days. Both teams will swing into action in February with trips to Florida, California, and a few other warm weather destinations, and it's really just 4 or 5 weeks away. As I mentioned at the top of the show, this is not only our first program of the new year, it's also the beginning of a new partnership. Starting today, the show will be featured on one of our great Michigan sources for information, SB Nation's Maize N Brew. So visit www.maizenbrew.com and check it out. Joshua Hensky and the group of talented writers here at Maize N Brew work hard to deliver the latest Michigan news for you 7 days a week, so check it out. I am very proud to be affiliated with such a great site and look forward to many years of being a part of the team. If you listen on your laptop or desktop, visit the iTunes Store and sign up for free delivery. Our show app is also available at iTunes, the podcast box at Amazon.com, or the Windows 8 App Store. You will also find us on Stitcher Radio On Demand and TuneIn Radio. My phone lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. You can also email me at the MichiganManPodcast@yahoo.com. I'd love to hear from you, so give us a call or drop us an email. That will take care of us for this week. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. Until next week, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for listening to the Michigan Man Podcast. You can find us on the web at www.themichiganmanpodcast.com or www.maizenbrew.com. Our listener line is open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or you can email your thoughts and opinions to the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is brought to you in partnership with Maize N Brew, your best source for quality Michigan Wolverine news, analysis, stats, and scores from the fan perspective. Visit www.maizenbrew.com for the best coverage of your Wolverines. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!